I was organizing Christmas decorations in my basement when I heard Sarah's voice drift down through the heating vent. "Just leave all 4 grandkids with her," she said, laughing. My heart stopped. Through that vent, I heard my daughter and son planning to dump their children on me for 2 weeks while they jetted off to Cancun. No discussion, no asking, just assuming good old mom would handle everything. That's when I decided Christmas would be very different this year. I stood frozen in my basement, surrounded by boxes of ornaments I'd collected over 40 years. Each decoration held a memory, but suddenly they all felt meaningless. My hands trembled as I gripped the wooden banister, forcing myself to breathe slowly while my daughter's voice continued floating down through the heating system. "She literally has nothing else going on." Sarah continued, her tone casual and dismissive. "Between you and me, I think she needs this. Gives her purpose, you know." My son Brian's response hit even harder. "Right. And it's not like she goes anywhere. Last month she mentioned some high school reunion thing, but I told her we needed coverage for the twins. She canceled it immediately." They laughed. Actually laughed about how I'd given up seeing friends I hadn't connected with in decades. Friends who'd been asking about me, wondering why Darla Thompson never showed up to anything anymore. The truth was simple and pathetic. I'd become a full-service, unpaid nanny who happened to share DNA with my employers. 15 years. That's how long I'd been retired from my job as a high school English teacher. 15 years of thinking I'd finally have time for myself for travel for the pottery classes I'd always wanted to take. Instead, I'd become the default solution to every scheduling conflict, every date night, every last-minute emergency that mysteriously coincided with golf tournaments or spa weekends. Sarah, my eldest at 42, worked as a marketing executive for a pharmaceutical company. She'd climbed that corporate ladder with determination I'd once admired until I realized she'd used my shoulders as her stepping stones. Her children, Emma and Ethan, 12 and 10 respectively, spent more time in my house than their own. I knew their teachers better than their parents did. I'd attended every school play, every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference while Sarah attended board meetings, and Brian attended to his golf handicap. Brian, 39, and a financial advisor who apparently couldn't advise himself out of treating his mother like an ATM, had twins. Mason and Madison, 8 years old and full of energy, I struggled to match anymore. Sweet kids, all of them. Not their fault their parents had forgotten that grandmothers were people too, not just convenient drop-off centers with cookies. "The tickets are already purchased." Sarah's voice continued through the vent. "I used Mom's emergency credit card. You know, the one she gave me for real emergencies." My stomach turned. That credit card was supposed to be for medical emergencies, car breakdowns, genuine crises, not for funding their escape to an adults-only resort while I played Mary Poppins for the 1,000th time. "How much?" Brian asked. $12,000 for both families. All-inclusive Cancun Dreams Resort, December 26th through January 8th. $12,000. My mouth went dry. That was 4 months of my pension. 4 months of the fixed income I lived on since retirement, carefully budgeted to last through my supposed golden years. "Jessica's already picking out her bikinis," Brian added, referring to his wife. "She says it's been too long since we've had adult time." Adult time. As if I hadn't been an adult for 68 years. As if my time had no value, no purpose beyond being their perpetual backup plan. "What about Christmas dinner?" Brian asked. "Mom always does her whole production." "That's the beauty of it," Sarah responded. "We'll do Christmas Eve dinner at her place like always. Act completely normal. Then we'll tell her about our emergency business trip on Christmas morning. By the time she figures out we're gone, we'll be sipping margaritas on the beach." I sank onto the bottom step, my knees too weak to hold me. The basement suddenly felt like a tomb filled with the ghosts of sacrifices I'd made without anyone noticing. The cruise to Alaska I'd canceled 3 years ago when Sarah needed emergency childcare for a month. The writing workshop in New York I'd passed up because Brian's nanny quit. The simple dinner dates with friends I'd postponed so many times they'd stopped inviting me. My doctor's words from my last checkup echoed in my mind. Darla, your stress levels are concerning. Your blood pressure is elevated and you're showing signs of exhaustion. You need to slow down. Take time for yourself. I'd hidden the heart medication from my family tucked behind the vitamins in my medicine cabinet. Didn't want to worry them, I'd told myself. The truth was darker. I knew they'd see my health issues as an inconvenience to their schedules, not a concern for their mother. She honestly loves it, Sarah continued upstairs. Remember last month when she kept asking if we needed her to watch the kids? It's like she has empty nest syndrome in reverse. Empty nest syndrome. They had no idea that my nest felt empty even when it was full of grandchildren. Because being surrounded by kids who called me grandma wasn't the same as being valued, respected, or even seen as a whole person by my own children. Mark thinks we should throw her a bone, Sarah added, mentioning her husband. Maybe bring her back a souvenir, a nice shawl or something. A shawl. From the vacation funded by my emergency credit card, while I watched 4 children for 2 weeks without being asked, consulted, or compensated. A shawl to wrap around shoulders that ached from carrying their burdens without a single thank you. She'll probably redecorate while we're gone, Brian joked. You know how she gets with those grandkids. Last time I picked them up, she'd built them an entire fort in the living room. At her age? At my age. As if 68 meant I should be in a rocking chair, grateful for any crumbs of attention they threw my way. As if the years I'd spent raising them, sacrificing for them, working double shifts to put them through college debt-free, meant I'd forfeited my right to a life of my own. The conversation drifted to resort amenities and restaurant reservations, but I'd heard enough. I stood slowly, my joints protesting from sitting on the cold basement steps. But something else was happening inside me. The sadness and hurt were crystallizing into something harder, sharper. Something that felt like the beginning of change. I looked around the basement at all those Christmas decorations. The handmade ornaments from Sarah and Brian's elementary school days. The world's best grandma mug Emma had painted at a pottery shop I'd taken her to and paid for. The photo albums filled with pictures of family vacations I'd funded but hadn't been invited to join. For the first time in 15 years, I saw it all clearly. I hadn't retired from teaching. I'd simply switched from a classroom where I was respected to one where I was expected to work for free without tenure, without appreciation, without even the basic courtesy of being asked rather than told. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Sarah. Hey, Mom, can't wait for Christmas Eve dinner. Should I bring anything? I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back. Just yourselves, sweetheart. I'll take care of everything. Because I always did. But this time, I thought as I climbed the stairs with new determination, this time would be different. This time, Darla Thompson was done being taken for granted. This time, the lesson plan would include teaching my children something they'd apparently never learned, that mothers are people too, and even the most patient woman has her limits. The twist of the knife came as I reached the top of the stairs and heard Sarah's final comment. Oh, and remind me to grab that notebook where I wrote everything down. Can't leave evidence lying around. Mom's not stupid, just conveniently available. Not stupid, just conveniently available. Well, my darling daughter was about to learn just how inconvenient I could be when pushed too far. But first, I needed to see exactly what they'd written in that notebook. Because if I was going to teach them a lesson, I was going to do it with all the facts in hand. I waited until I heard car doors slam and engines start before I made my way upstairs. The house felt different somehow, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the betrayal. My footsteps on the hardwood floors I'd refinished myself seemed louder, more deliberate. In the kitchen, steam still rose from the coffee maker, and there on the granite counter sat Sarah's planning notebook. She'd left it behind. The leather-bound planner I'd given her last Christmas, ironically enough. "To help you stay organized," I'd said when she unwrapped it. Now it would help me understand the full extent of their deception. I poured myself coffee with steady hands, though my heart hammered against my ribs. The first page made me sink into a kitchen chair. Operation Holiday Freedom was written in Sarah's neat handwriting across the top, below a detailed timeline that made my teaching planning look amateur. December 26th, 6 a.m. Drop kids at mom's. Tell her about emergency conference. By the time she can verify, we'll be in the air. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. They'd gamified my manipulation. I turned the page. Financial calculations filled the next spread. Resort $12,000. New vacation wardrobe $3,000. Spa packages $2,000. Airport parking, restaurants, excursions. The total came to nearly $20,000. At the bottom, in Brian's scrawled writing, "Pull from Kids' Education Fund. Mom will never check." The education fund. My hands began to shake. 5 years ago, I'd set up college savings accounts for all 4 grandchildren, contributing $200 per month from my pension. I'd given Sarah and Brian access for emergencies, only trusting them to guard their children's futures as carefully as I did. I pulled out my phone, fingers fumbling with the banking app I'd finally learned to use. The login took 3 tries. When the account balance appeared, I had to blink several times to process what I was seeing. $23,000 was missing. Not just for this trip. Transaction after transaction going back 2 years. Transfer to checking. External transfer. Cash withdrawal. My coffee mug slipped shattering on the tile floor I'd helped Brian install when he'd bought his house. Brown liquid spread like the stain of realization across my mind. They hadn't just been taking my time. They'd been stealing from their own children money I'd scraped together by skipping my own small pleasures, wearing the same winter coat for 8 years, patching and repatching my reading glasses instead of buying new ones. I left the shattered mug where it lay and kept reading. There were text message screenshots printed and taped into the notebook. A group chat between Sarah, Brian, Jessica, and Mark. My son-in-law and daughter-in-law were full participants in this scheme. "Your mom's still using that flip phone," Jessica had written. "So cute. She'll never see our posts from Cancun." "The kids are getting suspicious," Mark had added. "Emma asked why Grandma always watches them but never comes on vacation." Sarah's response: "I told them Grandma is too old and boring for fun trips. They bought it." Too old and boring. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I'd taught Emma to ride a bike, spent hours reading Harry Potter aloud when she was younger, created elaborate treasure hunts in the backyard. But apparently, I was too boring for the beaches they'd visit, using money meant for her education. I forced myself to continue. There was a section labeled contingency plans. What if Mom says no? She won't. I'll cry about work stress. What if she gets sick? Hire agency nurse charge to her card. What if she finds out? Gaslight. Tell her she's getting confused, maybe time to consider assisted living. Assisted living. They were already planting seeds to put me away when I became too inconvenient. The final insult came on the last page. Division of assets was written in Brian's precise financial advisor script. Below, a detailed breakdown of my house value, my savings accounts, my pension details. They'd been through my papers probably during one of the many times I'd been distracted by grandchildren. At the bottom, house worth approximately $400,000. Split 2 ways, $200,000 each. Enough for kids' college and our retirement boost. They were planning to take everything. Not just my time, not just my love, not just the money I'd saved for grandchildren. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built. But something strange was happening as I absorbed each horrible detail. The tears stopped. The shaking stilled. The elderly woman who'd been quietly accepting every imposition began to disappear, and in her place stood the teacher who'd once commanded classrooms of rebellious teenagers. The woman who'd raised 2 children alone after their father left. The woman who'd earned her master's degree at night while working full-time. That woman didn't cry. She strategized. I photographed every page of the notebook with my smartphone, the one Sarah didn't know I'd upgraded to last month. Technology might not be my first language, but I'd learned enough. Each image was crystal clear, backed up automatically to the cloud storage my teenage neighbor had helped me set up. Next came the recording app, another skill learned from that same helpful neighbor who'd noticed me struggling with my old phone. "Mrs. Thompson," he'd said, "you need to protect yourself. People take advantage of seniors all the time." Smart kid. I'd baked him cookies. Now his advice would help me bake something entirely different for my children. I spent the next hour going through my important papers, photographing everything: bank statements, the trust documents for the education funds, my will, my property deed. Evidence of every dollar spent, every sacrifice made, every legal document they'd need to falsify to carry out their plans. Then I made a call. "Margaret Walsh's office," came the professional voice. "It's Darla Thompson. Is Margaret available?" Margaret had been my student 35 years ago, a shy girl who'd bloomed in my advanced writing class. Now she was one of the city's most successful elder law attorneys. We'd stayed in touch, meeting for lunch every few months. "Darla, of course, let me put you through." "Darla, what a lovely surprise." Margaret's warm voice filled the line. "How are those beautiful grandchildren?" "That's actually why I'm calling," I said, my teacher voice returning. "I need legal advice about some financial irregularities. Can we meet privately?" The pause was brief. "How about today? My 3 o'clock canceled. Can you make it?" "I'll be there." I ended the call and returned to the notebook. There were more pages detailing their vacation plans: couples massages, private beach dinners, scuba lessons, all funded by money meant for Emma's dream of becoming a veterinarian, Ethan's love of astronomy, Mason's artistic talents, Madison's ballet ambitions. My phone buzzed. Sarah again. "Mom, I think I left my planner there. Don't look inside. It's all boring work stuff. I'll grab it later." I typed back, "Already put it in your old room, dear. Didn't see it." Let her relax. Let her think her secrets were safe. Because Darla Thompson was done being the convenient grandmother. Now I was the English teacher who'd once caught the principal embezzling fundraiser money. The woman who'd exposed plagiarism in the school board president's son's scholarship essay. The mother who'd tracked down her ex-husband for 18 years of back child support. They thought I was old, boring, and easily manipulated. They were about to learn that the same woman who'd raised them, who'd taught them to tie their shoes and write their names, had also taught hundreds of students one crucial lesson: never underestimate someone just because they're quiet. The most devastating essays often came from the students who observed silently from the back row. And I'd been observing for a very long time. I cleaned up the broken mug, each shard reminding me of something else that had shattered today. But sometimes things needed to break completely before they could be rebuilt properly. As I wrapped the pieces in newspaper, I made mental notes. 2 weeks until Christmas Eve. 2 weeks to gather everything I needed. 2 weeks to plan something that would make Operation Holiday Freedom look like a kindergarten art project. Because my children were about to receive the kind of education money couldn't buy a lesson, and consequences served with a side of poetic justice. I tucked their notebook into my purse. Evidence for Margaret. Then I walked through my house with new eyes, seeing not the free daycare center it had become, but the home I'd earned, the life I'd built, the future I still had the right to claim. The Christmas decorations could wait. Right now I had planning of my own to do, and unlike my children, I wouldn't leave my notebook lying around. The next 2 weeks required Oscar-worthy acting skills I didn't know I possessed. Every morning, I woke up with the weight of what I'd discovered pressing on my chest like a stone. But by the time I'd brushed my teeth and looked in the mirror, I'd transformed into the same old Grandma Darla everyone expected to see. "Morning, Mom," Sarah chirped when she dropped Emma and Ethan off the Saturday after my discovery. "You're a lifesaver. Client emergency." I smiled warmly, hugging my grandchildren. "Take your time, sweetheart. We'll make gingerbread houses today." What Sarah didn't know was that my phone tucked in my apron pocket was recording every word. Margaret's investigator had been thorough in his recommendations. Document everything. Create an undeniable pattern. Build a case that would hold up not just in family court, but in the court of family opinion. That afternoon, while the kids decorated cookies, I excused myself to make a call from my bedroom. Margaret answered on the first ring. "The forensic accountant finished reviewing the documents you provided," she said without preamble. "Darla, they've taken $23,467 over 24 months. That's fraud. We can file criminal charges if you want." Criminal charges against my own children. The thought made me sick. "Is there another way?" "Several. We can freeze the education accounts, immediately demand repayment through civil proceedings, and restructure the trust so you have sole control. But Darla, there's something else." "What?" "The pattern suggests escalation. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. This Cancun trip. It's the biggest yet. In my experience, people who steal from family don't stop until they're forced to." After ending the call, I returned to the kitchen where Emma was carefully piping frosting onto a gingerbread man. "Grandma," she said quietly, "why don't you ever come on our vacations?" My hand stilled on the cookie I was decorating. "What makes you ask that, sweetheart? Mom said you're too old for fun stuff, but you're fun here." Too old for fun stuff. The child's innocent repetition of her mother's words cut deeper than Sarah's original cruelty. But I kept my voice light. "Well, sometimes people get ideas in their heads that aren't quite right. What do you think? Am I too old for fun?" Emma grinned. "No way, you're the one who taught me to roller skate last summer. Then I guess your mom might be mistaken," I said, booping her nose with a flour-covered finger. She giggled, and I filed away another recording. Evidence that I was anything but the decrepit burden they'd painted me as. The next phase of my preparation involved money. I'd always been conservative with finances, a habit born from years of single motherhood. But now I needed to be strategic. Monday morning found me at my bank, where I'd maintained accounts for 40 years. "I'd like to open new accounts." I told the manager, a young man who probably wasn't born when I'd opened my first savings account here. "Checking and savings, and I need to remove authorized users from my existing accounts." "Of course, Mrs. Thompson. May I ask who you'd like to remove?" "Sarah Mitchell and Brian Thompson, my children." His fingers hesitated over the keyboard. "I see. And you'd like them removed from all accounts?" "Every single one. And I need to change all my passwords and security questions." It took 2 hours, but when I left, my finances were fortress secure. The emergency credit cards they had were maxed out and canceled. My regular accounts were transferred to new ones they couldn't access. It felt like drawing battle lines, but they'd fired the first shot when they'd stolen from babies. Tuesday brought Phase 2 legal documentation. Margaret had prepared everything. New power of attorney documents naming her instead of Sarah, updated medical directives, a new will that would make my children's jaws drop. Instead of the 50-50 split they'd counted on, everything would go to a trust for the grandchildren's education managed by Margaret's firm. The house they'd already divided in their minds would be sold to fund scholarships for underprivileged students at my old school. "You can change this any time," Margaret assured me as I signed. "This is leverage, not necessarily permanent." But it felt permanent. It felt like justice. Wednesday was shopping day, but not for Christmas presents. I drove 2 towns over to a travel agency paying cash for a booking that made my heart race. The Grand Mountain Lodge in Stowe, Vermont, December 24th through January 2nd. A suite with a fireplace, mountain views, and a spa package that cost more than I'd spent on myself in 5 years. "Traveling alone?" the agent asked. "Yes," I said, and the word tasted like freedom. "Completely alone." Thursday's task was perhaps the hardest. I spent hours writing letters, one for each family member. Not angry rants or guilt trips, but calm, detailed accountings of every sacrifice, every stolen dollar, every overheard insult. Teacher habits die hard. I revised each one 3 times until they were perfect combinations of hurt and hard truth. Friday brought Brian and the twins for their regular sleepover. As I made their favorite pizza, I watched my son sprawl on my couch, scrolling through his phone. "Markets are crazy," he said without looking up. "Good thing I moved our portfolios before the dip." Our portfolios. He managed millions for strangers, but had systematically drained his children's college funds. "You've always been good with money," I said, keeping my tone neutral while adjusting my phone's position to catch his response. He laughed. "Learn from the best. Remember when Dad left and you managed to keep us afloat? Though I've got to say you could have been smarter with investments. That education fund you set up, the returns are pathetic." The returns he'd stolen. "I suppose I'm just a simple old teacher," I said. "Not sophisticated like you. Don't worry, Mom. I'll make sure you're taken care of when the time comes." When the time comes. Like I was already 1 foot in the grave instead of a healthy woman with decades ahead of me. I turned away to hide my expression, busying myself with slicing vegetables for salad. That weekend, the whole family descended for what they didn't know would be our last traditional gathering before Christmas. I cooked their favorites pot roast so tender it fell apart, green beans with almond sweet potato casserole. I used the good china-lit candles and played Christmas music. If this was goodbye to the grandmother I'd been, I'd make it memorable. "This is amazing, Mom," Sarah said, helping herself to seconds. "You've outdone yourself." "Just wait until Christmas Eve," I promised. "I'm planning something extra special." Jessica and Mark exchanged glances across the table, probably thinking of beach cocktails while I handled their children. The kids chattered about Santa school plays and soccer tournaments I'd attended while their parents worked or golfed or scheduled couples time. After dinner, as I served homemade apple pie, Ethan piped up. "Grandma, are you going to teach me chess over Christmas break you promised?" "Of course, sweetheart," I said, ruffling his hair. What I didn't say was that he'd be learning from his parents, instead assuming they remembered how to play. That night after everyone left, I sat in my quiet house and reviewed my preparations. Bank accounts secured, legal documents filed, evidence documented and backed up in triplicate, travel plans confirmed, letters written and sealed. The hardest part was maintaining normalcy while my heart broke a little more each day. Every hug from the grandchildren felt like potential goodbye. Every casual cruelty from their parents added fuel to my resolve. They'd created this situation, not me. I was just the teacher grading their life assignment, and they were about to fail spectacularly. Sunday brought church where I sat in my usual pew and prayed for strength. Not forgiveness, not yet. That would have to come later after the lesson was learned. For now, I prayed for the courage to follow through, for the wisdom to know I was doing right, and for the hope that something good could come from this destruction. Pastor William's sermon was about truth and consequences, which felt like divine confirmation. "The truth will set you free," he said, "but first it might make you miserable." I was already miserable. Now it was time for freedom. Monday morning, December 20th. I made one final preparation. I called each grandchild's school and added their parents back as primary emergency contacts. For 2 years, I'd been the one they called for fevers, forgotten lunches, and behavioral issues. Time for Sarah and Brian to remember what parenting actually entailed. My neighbor Patricia stopped by that afternoon for coffee, as she did every Monday. We'd been friends for 30 years, watched each other's children grow, supported each other through divorces and deaths. "You seem different," she said, studying me over her mug. "More purposeful." "I'm making some changes," I admitted. "It's time." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "Good for you, honey. Whatever it is, it's about time you put yourself first." If she only knew how dramatically I was about to put myself first. That evening, I packed my suitcase in the privacy of my bedroom. Everything: new clothes from a shopping trip to the city where no one knew me, toiletries in elegant bottles instead of my usual drugstore brands, even new luggage to replace the battered set I'd used for 20 years. At the bottom of the suitcase, I placed a photo of all 4 grandchildren. Not because I needed reminders of why I was doing this, but because I wanted them with me when I finally stood up for myself. This wasn't about punishing them. It was about saving them from parents who would someday steal from them as casually as they'd stolen from me. Everything was ready. The stage was set. Tomorrow would begin the final act of this sad little drama, but the ending, that would be entirely my own script, and for once, I'd be the star of my own show. December 20th arrived with the kind of pristine snowfall that made everything look like a Christmas card. I stood at my kitchen window, coffee mug warming my hands, watching the flakes drift down like nature's own countdown. 4 days until the performance of a lifetime. The family dinner was scheduled for 6 o'clock. By 5:30, my house smelled like heaven: rosemary-crusted lamb, garlic, mashed potatoes, honey-glazed carrots, and fresh bread rising in the oven. I'd outdone myself intentionally. If this was to be remembered as the night everything changed, let it be remembered for beauty as well as betrayal. Sarah arrived first, bursting through the door without knocking as usual. "Mom, it smells incredible in here." She kissed my cheek perfunctorily while her eyes scanned the formal dining room setup. "You used Grandma's china." "Special occasion," I said, smoothing my apron. The same apron she'd given me 5 Christmases ago, embroidered with "World's Best Grandma." "How fitting." "Kids, go help Grandma," she instructed Emma and Ethan, who immediately ran to hug me properly. At least I'd taught them manners, even if their parents had forgotten theirs. Brian and his family arrived minutes later, Jessica complaining about the snow ruining her new boots, while the twins bounced around like puppies. Soon, my house was full of noise, full of family, full of the life I'd built and nurtured for decades. "Something smells expensive," Brian joked, peeking into the kitchen. "You didn't have to go all out, Mom." "Oh, but I did," I replied, basting the lamb. "You'll see why." Dinner began beautifully. I'd placed name cards at each seat using the calligraphy skills I'd learned for their wedding invitations. The children were delighted to find small presents at their places' leather journals with their initials embossed in gold. "For writing down your adventures," I explained as they thanked me. What I didn't say was that I hoped they'd use them to remember truth instead of the lies they might hear about tonight. The adults relaxed into their seats, wine-flowing conversation light. I played the perfect hostess, keeping glasses full and plates loaded while my phone recorded from its strategic position between the salt and pepper shakers. "A toast," Brian announced, suddenly raising his glass. "To Mom. for always being there, always saying yes, always making life easier for all of us. To Mom, everyone echoed, and I smiled graciously while noting the irony. Always saying yes. That had been my biggest mistake. The performance began over dessert. I'd made individual chocolate soufflés, timing them perfectly. As I served, Sarah cleared her throat dramatically. "So, Mom," she began exchanging glances with Brian. "Something's come up." "Oh." I settled into my chair, folding my hands in my lap like the attentive mother they expected. "It's work," Brian jumped in. "You know how it is in finance. End-of-year major client situation." "And I've got a pharmaceutical conference," Sarah added quickly. "Mandatory. Just found out today." "Just found out." The lie slid so easily from her lips, smoother than the chocolate she was savoring. When I asked, though, I knew every detail from their planning notebook. "We have to leave the 26th, Sarah said, studying her dessert intently. "Early morning flight." "Both of you. What are the odds?" My tone was light curious rather than suspicious. "I know, right?" Jessica laughed nervously. "But actually, Mark and I were thinking we might tag along. Turn it into a working vacation, network with other couples." "How wonderful," I said. "Where are these urgent business obligations taking you?" "Chicago." Brian said at the exact moment Sarah said Atlanta. They froze. The children, absorbed in their desserts, didn't notice, but I let the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. "I mean, I fly through Atlanta to get to Chicago," Sarah corrected smoothly. "And I connect in Chicago for Atlanta," Brian added. "How complex," I murmured. "Good thing you're traveling together for support." "Well, not exactly together," Sarah hedged. "But same dates, which brings us to a huge favor we need to ask." Here it came. The presumption dressed as request, the expectation wrapped in false apology. "We hate to ask," Brian said, not looking remotely hateful about it, "but could you watch the kids? I know it's a lot, 4 of them, for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I let surprise color my voice. My goodness, these must be extensive conferences. You know how these things are. Jessica waved vaguely. Sessions all day, networking dinners, then some built-in recovery time. Recovery time. On a beach in Cancun, courtesy of money stolen from these children's futures. "We'll make it up to you," Mark promised. "When we get back, we'll give you a whole week off." A week off? From my unpaid job as their servant? How generous. "Of course I'll help," I said, and watched their shoulders relax in unison. I live for time with my grandchildren." "You're the best mom," Sarah gushed. "I don't know what we'd do without you." "Probably have to parent your own children," I thought, but didn't say. Instead, I smiled and began clearing plates, waving off their half-hearted offers to help. "Oh, I should mention," I said casually as I stacked dishes, "I'm planning something special for Christmas Eve dinner, a real production. You'll all be here right 5 o'clock sharp." "Wouldn't miss it," Brian assured me. "Good. I'd hate for you to miss my surprise." The rest of the evening proceeded predictably. They discussed their fictional business trips with impressive detail, considering none of it was real. The children grew sleepy, curled up on the couch watching Christmas movies while their parents planned their abandonment. "Should we leave you some emergency cash?" Sarah asked, though I noticed she made no move toward her wallet. "Oh, I'm sure I'll manage," I said. "After all, I've been managing for quite some time." The double meaning went over their heads. They were too busy congratulating themselves on their clever deception to notice the edge in my voice. As they prepared to leave, I hugged each grandchild extra tight. "I love you to the moon and back," I whispered to each one our special saying since they were babies. "Love you too, Grandma," they chorused, and my heart cracked a little more. At the door, Sarah paused. "Mom, you're sure you're okay with this? I know it's a lot to ask." For a moment, I almost broke. Almost told her I knew everything, almost begged her to reconsider, almost asked when I'd become nothing more than convenience to her. But then I remembered the notebook, the stolen money, the assisted living discussions. "I'm perfectly fine with it," I said smoothly. "In fact, I'm planning to make this a Christmas none of us will ever forget." "You're amazing," she said, and for once I agreed. I was amazing. Amazing for putting up with this treatment for so long, amazing for finally finding my backbone, and amazing for what I was about to do. After they left, I locked the door and leaned against it, exhausted from the performance. 4 days. I had 4 days to finish my preparations, to steel my resolve to transform from doormat to force of nature. I walked through my empty house, collecting the hidden recording devices I'd planted. Everything had been captured. Every lie, every false concern, every moment of their elaborate charade. In my bedroom, I opened the closet and looked at my packed suitcase. The Grand Mountain Lodge confirmation was tucked in the side pocket. I'd prepaid for everything, including the premium package that would disconnect me from phone service unless I chose to check in, perfect for someone who needed to disappear without technically disappearing. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Thanks for dinner, Grandma. Can't wait for Christmas Eve." Sweet child. She had no idea her parents were planning to dump her here for 2 weeks while they sipped cocktails by the pool. No idea the money for her college education was currently funding their deception. No idea her grandmother was about to teach her parents the kind of lesson that would echo through generations. I typed back, "It will be unforgettable, sweetheart." Then I sat at my desk and reviewed my letters one more time. One for each of them detailing everything. Not just the recent betrayals, but the pattern of years. Every missed holiday while I babysat. Every sacrifice I'd made that went unnoticed. Every dollar stolen from children who deserved better. The letters would be their Christmas Eve surprise. By the time they read them, I'd be gone. By the time they realized the consequences of their actions, it would be too late to undo them. 4 more days of pretending. 4 more days of being the mother and grandmother they'd created in their minds, endlessly available, endlessly giving, endlessly naive. Then finally I would teach them the lesson every good teacher saves for last. Actions have consequences, and some bells can't be unrung. I climbed into bed, pulling my quilt up to my chin. Tomorrow I'd need to shop for Christmas Eve dinner ingredients. The Last Supper I thought with dark humor. How appropriate that their betrayal would be revealed over bread and wine. Sleep came slowly, my mind racing with details. But when it finally arrived, I dreamed not of revenge, but of mountains covered in snow, of spa treatments I'd never indulged in, of freedom that tasted sweeter than any Christmas cookie. In 4 days, Darla Thompson would disappear. In her place would rise someone new, a woman who knew her worth and demanded others recognize it too. It was the best gift I could give myself, and ultimately the best gift I could give them. December 24th dawned crisp and bright. I woke at 5 a.m., adrenaline making sleep impossible. This was it. The day I'd planned for, worried about, and almost talked myself out of a dozen times. But as I made my coffee and watched the sunrise paint the snow-covered yard pink and gold, my resolve crystallized into diamond-hard certainty. By 7, I was in my garage quietly loading my car, suitcase in the trunk covered with a blanket, gifts for the grandchildren tucked into a bag on the floor. Everything else I needed was already waiting at the lodge, shipped ahead by helpful staff who thought I was treating myself to a solo Christmas celebration. At 9, I began the calls. Each grandchild got their own private conversation away from parental ears. "Emma, honey, it's Grandma. Can you talk privately for a minute?" "Sure, Grandma, I'm in my room." "I have an early Christmas present for you, but it's our secret for now, okay?" I love secrets. I smiled at her enthusiasm. "Check under your bed. I hid something there last time I visited." Rustling sounds, then a gasp. "A phone, Grandma. Mom says I'm too young for a phone." This is a special one just for us to talk. It has my number programmed. If you ever need me day or night, you call. Can you keep it hidden? Like a spy. Exactly like a spy. I love you, sweetheart. I repeated the process with Ethan, then the twins. 4 phones, 4 lifelines to their grandmother when their parents realized their free babysitter had flown the coop. By noon, I was in the kitchen preparing the elaborate Christmas Eve dinner I'd promised. The turkey was in the oven sides, prepped desserts cooling. It would all be perfect, ready to serve at 5 o'clock sharp. The only thing missing would be the cook. At 2 p.m., I set the dining room table with military precision. The good china crystal glasses silver that had been my mother's. At each place setting an envelope. Cream-colored expensive paper names written in my careful cursive. The letters I'd agonized over revised endlessly and finally sealed with wax like the old-fashioned woman they thought I was. 2:30 found me placing the final touches. A centerpiece of roses and holly. Candles ready to be lit. The house smelled like every Christmas of their childhoods when they'd actually appreciated my efforts. At 3, I took a shower, styled my hair, applied makeup with extra care. I chose my outfit deliberately, the elegant burgundy dress they'd never seen me wear. The pearl necklace saved for special occasions that never seemed special enough. The heeled boots that made me stand taller than the hunched grandmother they'd invented in their minds. 3:30, time to go. I walked through my house one last time, checking everything. The letters on the table seemed to pulse with significance. The turkey timer was set. The other dishes were ready to be served. The entire feast would be perfect, waiting for a family who would arrive to find their assumptions as cold as the food would become. I paused in the doorway, looking back at the beautiful table, the twinkling tree, the portrait of perfection I'd created one last time. Then I typed out the text I'd composed and saved to drafts days ago. Running a bit late with dinner prep. Let yourselves in. Doors unlocked. Champagne is chilling. Start without me if needed. See you soon. I sent it to the family group chat, then immediately turned off my phone. Whatever responses came, I wouldn't see them. Not today. Maybe not for many days. The drive to the Grand Mountain Lodge took 3 hours, but I'd built in extra time. I stopped once for gas, paying cash, feeling like a fugitive in the best possible way. The further I drove from home, the lighter I felt. Years of accumulated burden lifted with every mile. I'd timed it perfectly. As I pulled into the lodge's circular drive at 6:45, I knew they'd have been at my house for over an hour. Long enough to find the letters, long enough to read them, long enough to start panicking. "Welcome to the Grand Mountain Lodge, Ms. Thompson." The valet greeted me, taking my keys. "Checking in for our Christmas special." "I certainly am," I said, standing straighter than I had in years. The lobby was magnificent. Soaring ceilings, massive fireplaces, the scent of pine and cinnamon. Families gathered in clusters, couples walked hand in hand, and there I was alone by choice, not circumstance. My suite was everything the photos had promised. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked snow-covered peaks. A fireplace crackled with real wood. The bathroom held a soaking tub I fully intended to use. On the desk, a bottle of champagne waited in an ice bucket with a note, "Welcome to your Christmas retreat. Enjoy every moment." I poured a glass and stood at the window watching skiers make their final runs as the sun set behind the mountains. Somewhere back home, my family was dealing with the chaos I'd left behind. But for the first time in 15 years, their chaos wasn't my problem. Dinner at the lodge restaurant was a revelation. I'd made a reservation for one, and the hostess led me to a perfect table by the window. "Dining alone this evening?" the waiter asked kindly. "Dining independently," I corrected with a smile, "and loving every minute." I ordered things I never allowed myself at home, the most expensive wine on the menu, the chef's tasting course dessert without sharing. Other diners glanced over occasionally, perhaps wondering about the elegantly dressed older woman enjoying her own company so thoroughly. If they only knew. If they could see the woman who just 12 hours ago had laid out evidence of theft, betrayal, and calculated cruelty for her children to discover. The woman who'd spent years being taken for granted finally taking herself seriously. My phone stayed off, buried in my purse, but I could imagine the scene back home. Sarah would have arrived first, always punctual when free food was involved. She'd have called out cheerfully, expecting to find me frantically cooking. Instead, she'd have found the empty kitchen, the timer going off, the turkey perfectly done, but no one to carve it. Then she'd have seen the table, the letters, her name on one so formal, so unlike the casual notes I usually left. She'd have opened it with curiosity, turning to confusion, turning to horror. "My dearest Sarah," her letter began. "By the time you read this, I'll be celebrating Christmas my way for the first time in 15 years. Brian would have arrived during her first reading equally confused. Jessica and Mark trailing behind kids, racing ahead to find Grandma. But no Grandma, just letters, just truth laid out in black and white. "Brian, my son," his letter opened. "I taught you mathematics when you were young. Now let me show you the calculations of a grandmother's love and how your actions have bankrupted that account." The letters were thorough, dates, amounts, conversations overheard, plans discovered, everything documented with the precision of a teacher who'd spent decades writing report cards that changed children's futures. But more than evidence, the letters contained pain. The missed reunions, the canceled plans, the health concerns hidden because being sick would inconvenience them, the dreams deferred and finally abandoned, the woman erased in favor of the service provider they'd created. "I've transferred the resort reservation to my name," Sarah's letter revealed. "Consider it repayment for one of the many vacations you've taken while I watched your children. The education funds are now frozen pending full repayment of the $23,000 you stole. Yes, stole, from your own children." Brian's letter was equally direct. "Your financial expertise apparently doesn't extend to ethics. Margaret Walsh, my attorney, has documentation of every transfer. You have 30 days to repay the funds or face legal action. Your choice." For Jessica and Mark, shorter notes. "You participated in this deception. You benefited from this theft. You are no longer welcome in my home until you've proven you can respect the woman who helped raise your children." But it was the final paragraph in each letter that would hit hardest. "I love my grandchildren too much to let them grow up thinking it's acceptable to treat anyone, especially family, as servants. I love myself too much to continue accepting treatment I wouldn't wish on anyone. And yes, despite everything, I still love you. But love without respect is just manipulation, and I'm done being manipulated. When you're ready to have an honest conversation about building a real relationship, not just a service arrangement, you know where to find me. Until then, Merry Christmas. May it teach you what I could not." By now they'd have tried calling, dozens of times, hundreds maybe. My phone powered off, collected their panic in digital silence. The waiter appeared with dessert dark chocolate souffle with raspberry coulis. "Compliments of the chef," he said, "for our Christmas Eve guests." I savored each bite, thinking of the elaborate dessert table I'd left behind. The cookie plates arranged just so, the pie cooling on the counter, the cake decorated with each grandchild's name. Food that would go uneaten because the cook had finally decided to feed her own soul instead. After dinner, I walked through the lodge admiring decorations that someone else had hung, enjoying music someone else had selected. Families passed, some looking harried from traveling, some glowing with holiday joy. I felt a pang not of regret, but of recognition. I could have had this. Real holidays, real relaxation, real recognition of my worth. Back in my suite, I ran a bath, adding the expensive bath salts provided. As I soaked, I thought about my grandchildren. They were the only wild card in my plan, the only aspect that could make me waver. But the phones I'd given them were my insurance. They could reach me if truly needed. And perhaps seeing their parents scramble to actually parent for 2 weeks would teach them lessons too. I'd left one final gift for the children in my letter to their parents. The grandchildren have phones now. My number only. If you take them away, Margaret will consider it interference with family relationships in our pending legal matter. Choose wisely. By 10 p.m., exhaustion hit. But it was good exhaustion, the kind that came from finally standing up after years of being bent over. I crawled into the king-sized bed, luxuriating in sheets finer than any I'd ever owned. Tomorrow was Christmas. My first Christmas in 15 years that belonged entirely to me. No cooking for 20, no wrapping gifts while others slept. No pretending that exhaustion was joy, that service was the same as love. As I drifted toward sleep, I wondered if they'd figured it out yet. If they'd tried to book last-minute flights only to discover holiday prices were astronomical. If they'd called babysitters only to find everyone was busy with their own families. If they'd opened their banking apps to see the education funds locked tighter than Fort Knox. Most of all, I wondered if they'd started to understand. Not just the inconvenience, but the injury. Not just the money, but the meanness. Not just the assumption of availability, but the erasure of personhood. The last thought before sleep took me was of Emma's voice on our secret phone call. "Grandma, are you okay? You sound different." "I'm better than okay, sweetheart. I'm finally becoming myself again." And I was. Darla Thompson, teacher, mother, grandmother, but first and foremost human being, worthy of respect, recognition, and her own life. Outside my window, snow began to fall, covering the world in fresh white possibility. Inside, I slept better than I had in years, dreaming of nothing but peace. Christmas morning at the Grand Mountain Lodge was everything I'd imagined and more. I woke naturally at 8, no alarm needed, no grandchildren bouncing on my bed at dawn. Sunlight streamed through the windows, making the fresh snow sparkle like scattered diamonds. I ordered room service breakfast, another first, and ate Belgian waffles in bed while watching the news. At 9:30, curiosity got the better of me. I powered on my phone. 147 missed calls, 89 text messages, 43 voicemails. The numbers alone told the story of escalating panic. I scrolled through the texts, first watching the progression from confusion to anger to desperation. Sarah, 5:47 p.m., December 24. "Mom, where are you?" The turkey timer went off. Sarah, 6:03 p.m. "This isn't funny. The kids are hungry." Brian, 6:15 p.m. "Mom, what's going on? We found your letters." Sarah, 6:22 p.m. "How could you do this to us on Christmas Eve?" Brian, 6:45 p.m. "Mom, please, let's talk about this like adults." Jessica, 7:10 p.m. "The children are crying. I hope you're happy." Mark, 7:33 p.m. "This is elder abuse in reverse. We're considering calling the police." I actually laughed at that one. Elder abuse in reverse. Leave it to Mark to invent a crime to avoid accountability. The messages grew more frantic as the evening progressed. By 10 p.m., they'd clearly tried to salvage something. Sarah, 10:17 p.m. "We fed the kids pizza. Do you have any idea how hard it was to find pizza on Christmas Eve?" Brian, 10:45 p.m. "The flights to Cancun leave in 8 hours. Mom, please." Sarah, 11:33 p.m. "We can't find babysitters. Everyone is with family." Brian, 12:04 a.m. "This is kidnapping. You gave our children phones without permission." Sarah, 12:45 a.m. I can't believe my own mother would be this selfish. The Christmas morning messages shifted tone again. Brian 7:00 a.m. Mom, we're worried. Just let us know you're safe. Sarah 7:30 a.m. The kids want to talk to you. Please don't punish them for our mistakes. I noticed what was missing. Not one genuine apology. Not one acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just anger that their plans were disrupted, worry about consequences, and attempts to guilt me through the grandchildren. I selected Sarah's number and typed, "I'm safe. Enjoying a beautiful Christmas morning. The children have my number if they need me. I suggest you spend today figuring out childcare that doesn't involve theft and manipulation. Merry Christmas." Then I turned the phone off again. The lodge's Christmas brunch was spectacular. I joined other guests in the dining room, some families, some couples, a few other solo diners like myself. I struck up a conversation with a woman about my age at the next table. "Traveling alone?" she asked kindly. "Celebrating alone," I corrected. "First time in years I've had Christmas to myself." "Good for you," she said, raising her mimosa and toast. "I did the same thing 5 years ago. Best decision I ever made. Now my family actually appreciates when I show up." We ended up sharing a table, swapping stories of thankless holidays past and boundaries finally established. Her name was Ruth, and she'd been a nurse for 40 years before retiring and reclaiming her life from demanding adult children. "The guilt is the hardest part," she said, cutting into her Eggs Benedict. "They train you to feel guilty for having needs. Or for having money they think should be theirs," I added, thinking of the house division plans in Sarah's notebook. "Oh, honey, wait until you hear about my son trying to get power of attorney because I went to Europe alone at 70. We laughed until our sides hurt two older women who'd found freedom on the other side of exploitation. We exchanged numbers, making plans to meet for lunch when I returned home. My first new friend in years who knew me as Darla, not just someone's mother or grandmother. After brunch, I called Margaret from my room. She answered on the first ring despite it being Christmas. "Darla, I've been hoping you'd call. How are you holding up?" "Surprisingly well. How's the legal side?" "Moving along. I fielded some interesting calls last night. Your son threatened to sue me for conspiracy to defraud. I reminded him that fraud was exactly what we were addressing, just not the kind he meant. And the education accounts? Frozen solid. They'll need a court order to access them, and no judge will grant that given the evidence. Speaking of which, both of them tried to access the accounts around midnight last night, probably hoping to move the money before the freeze took full effect. Even now, their first thought had been to grab more money, not to make amends. "What about the house?" I asked, remembering their detailed plans for my property. "I've filed the paperwork to put it in an irrevocable trust. They can't touch it, can't force a sale, can't even suggest you're incompetent without triggering an automatic legal review that would expose their financial crimes." Safety, security, words that shouldn't have felt foreign when thinking about my own children, but did. That afternoon, I treated myself to a spa appointment. As I lay on the massage table, tension I'd carried for years melted away. The masseuse commented on the knots in my shoulders. "Stress," she asked gently. "Former stress," I replied. "I just retired from a demanding unpaid position." Around 4 p.m., I checked my phone again. The messages had evolved. My neighbor Patricia had clearly been recruited. "Patricia, Darla honey, your family is at your house. They seem upset. Are you okay?" I responded, "I'm wonderful. If they're still there tomorrow, could you remind them that loitering is a crime?" The grandchildren had discovered their phones. Their messages broke my heart and reinforced my resolve simultaneously. "Emma, Grandma Mom is crying. Did we do something wrong?" "Ethan, Dad says you're sick. Are you in the hospital?" "Mason, we opened presents, but it feels weird without you." "Madison, Mommy won't stop yelling at Daddy." I crafted careful responses to each child, reassuring them of my love while not explaining adult problems. To Emma, "You did nothing wrong, sweetheart. Sometimes adults need space to think. I love you always." By evening, social media had entered the chat. Sarah had posted on Facebook, "When family betrays you at Christmas, prayers needed." The comments were illuminating. Most expressed sympathy until one brave soul asked, "Didn't you just post about going to Cancun?" The post disappeared within an hour. Brian tried a different approach on his LinkedIn, dealing with elderly parent issues during the holidays. "Anyone know good resources for aging parents who make impulsive decisions?" I screenshot that one for Margaret. Evidence of their continued attempts to paint me as incompetent rather than injured. That evening, I attended the lodge's Christmas dinner. 3 courses of gourmet food I didn't have to cook, serve, or clean up after. I wore the emerald dress I'd bought for my reunion, the one still with tags, because I'd canceled to babysit. A text came through during dessert. From Mark this time, "The airlines won't transfer the tickets without your consent. This is theft." I typed back, "The irony of you calling me a thief while vacationing on stolen education funds is not lost on me. The transfer code is in my letter. Read it again." It was there in the postscript I knew they'd overlook in their initial fury. The code to transfer the tickets back to their names, but with one caveat: it expired at midnight on December 26th. If they wanted their vacation, they had 24 hours to figure out childcare legitimately. Later that evening, I sat by the lobby fireplace reading a book I'd bought months ago but never opened. A couple approached hesitantly. "Excuse me," the woman said, "but aren't you Mrs. Thompson, Emma and Ethan's grandmother?" My stomach dropped. Even here I couldn't escape. "We're the Richardsons. Emma's in class with our daughter. We just wanted to say we think you're amazing. Emma talks about you constantly. You're at every event, every game. We've always wondered how you do it all." "Well," I said carefully, "I'm learning I don't have to do it all." Mr. Richardson nodded knowingly. "Our parents live in Florida. They visit twice a year and think they're heavily involved grandparents. Seeing you at everything while Sarah's always traveling for work? Well, we noticed. Others had seen, others had known. I wasn't imagining the imbalance. They wished me a Merry Christmas and moved on, leaving me with the strange comfort of external validation. I'd been so deep in the forest of family dysfunction, I'd forgotten others could see the trees. My phone rang, Emma on her secret phone. "Grandma," her voice was small, worried. "Hi, sweetheart. Are you okay?" "Mom and Dad are fighting really bad. Uncle Brian and Aunt Jessica, too. They keep saying words I'm not supposed to know." "Where are you right now?" "In my room with Ethan. Mason and Madison are in the guest room. The adults are all downstairs yelling." My heart ached for them, but this too was necessary. They needed to see their parents' true priorities. "Do you have the snacks I left in your room last week?" I asked, remembering the emergency stash I'd hidden. "Yes, the Christmas cookies and juice boxes." "Good. Share with your brother. Watch a movie on your tablet. The adults will sort themselves out." "Grandma, are you mad at us?" "Never, sweet girl. I'm mad at the situation, but never at you. I love you forever and always." "Love you too, Grandma. Will you come home soon?" "In a few days. And when I do, things will be different, but different in a good way. I promise." After we hung up, I sat staring at the fire, wondering if I'd done the right thing. But then I remembered Sarah laughing about my empty life, Brian calculating my house value, the casual cruelty of their assumptions. No, the children would survive a few days of chaos. What they wouldn't have survived was growing up watching their grandmother be treated like furniture, learning that love meant accepting whatever treatment others decided to dish out. I raised my hot chocolate to the flames. "Merry Christmas, Darla," I whispered to myself. "You did it. You finally did it." Tomorrow would bring new challenges. They'd either scramble to find legitimate childcare or miss their stolen vacation. The legal proceedings would begin. Relationships would need to be rebuilt or released. But tonight on this Christmas I'd claimed for myself, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: respect. Not from them, not yet, maybe never, but from myself. And that gift was worth more than all the appreciation they'd never shown, all the money they'd stolen, all the time they'd assumed was theirs. The best teachers know that sometimes the most important lessons are the hardest ones. And sometimes the best gift you can give your family is showing them who you really are when you finally stop pretending to be who they need you to be. January 2nd arrived with the kind of bitter cold that makes the world crystal clear. I'd extended my stay at the lodge through New Year's, treating myself to a solo celebration that felt more like a victory lap than a lonely evening. As I drove home, my car loaded with small gifts for the grandchildren and a new confidence I wore like armor, I wondered what I'd find. The house looked the same from the outside, though I noticed Brian's car in the driveway. I pulled into the garage, took a deep breath, and entered through the kitchen door. They were waiting in my living room. Sarah and Brian sat on the couch like chastened children, while Jessica and Mark occupied the love seat. The grandchildren were nowhere to be seen, probably at school for the first day back after break. "Hello," I said, simply not bothering to remove my coat yet. Let them see I wouldn't necessarily be staying. "Mom," Sarah started, then stopped. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "We need to talk." "Yes," I agreed, finally taking off my coat with deliberate slowness. "We do." Brian cleared his throat. "First, we want to know where you went." "No," I said calmly, hanging my coat in the closet. "First, you want to apologize. Then we can discuss whether my whereabouts are any of your business." The directness startled them. This wasn't the accommodating mother they expected. Sarah tried again. "We're sorry you felt hurt." "Stop." I held up my hand. "That's not an apology. That's blame shifting. Try again." Jessica shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Thompson, the children have been asking." "The children have my number. I've spoken with them every day." I moved to my chair, the one they'd discussed selling in their notebook. What they've been asking is why their parents spent Christmas screaming at each other instead of celebrating. "We had to cancel our trip," Brian said, as if that explained everything. "You had to cancel your theft-funded vacation," I corrected. "There's a difference." Finally, the dam broke. Sarah burst into tears, real ones this time, not the manipulative kind I'd seen so often. "We fucked up, okay? Is that what you want to hear? We fucked up completely." "Language." I said mildly, though part of me appreciated the raw honesty. "No, Mom. Don't do the grandmother thing right now. We stole from you. We stole from our kids. We treated you like hired help," Brian finished quietly. "Except we didn't even pay you." I let the words hang in the air, feeling their weight fill the room. "Do you know what the worst part was?" I asked finally. Not the money, not the time, not even the assumption that I'd always say yes. It was overhearing you mock me. "She has nothing else. Too old and boring." Empty nest syndrome in reverse. Like I wasn't a person, just a service. Sarah flinched at each quoted phrase. "I didn't mean—" "You did mean it. That's the problem. You meant every word because you'd forgotten I was human." Mark spoke for the first time. "The transfer codes. We missed the deadline." "I know." I'd watched the deadline pass from my hotel room, knowing they'd be too busy arguing and scrambling to read carefully. "That money," Jessica began, "is gone. Consider it tuition for a very expensive lesson." "We can't afford—" Neither could I, but I managed. "You'll figure it out." Brian pulled out a checkbook. "We've scraped together $5,000 toward what we took from the education funds. That's a start. Margaret has the payment plan details. 36 months with interest. Every penny will go back to your children's futures." 36 months, Sarah gasped. The same amount of time you've been stealing. Seems poetic, doesn't it? They exchanged glances, having one of those silent married conversations. Finally, Brian asked, "What about us? Our relationship?" I'd thought about this moment constantly over my week away. What did I want? What could be salvaged? What was worth saving? "That depends entirely on you," I said. "I'm done being your default parent. If you need childcare, you ask in advance and accept if I say no. If I do agree, you pay me the going rate for babysitting." "Pay you?" Jessica looked shocked. "But you're their grandmother." "Yes, and grandmothers deserve compensation when they provide regular childcare. Or did you think my time was worthless because I'm retired?" "How much?" Brian asked, ever the financier. $20 an hour, the same you'd pay any other sitter." That's a lot." "Then I guess you'll have to budget for it, or find other arrangements. Your choice." Sarah wiped her eyes. "What else?" "Respect. Real respect, not performative. No more dropping by without calling. No more assuming I'm available. No more discussing my finances or my house like it's already yours." "About that," Brian started. "Margaret explained the trust." I cut him off. "The house will go to a scholarship fund when I die, unless, they leaned forward eagerly, "unless you've proven by then that you've truly changed. The trust has a provision. If our relationship has been genuinely repaired, documented through family therapy and consistent respectful behavior, I can amend it. But that's years away and entirely dependent on your actions." Family therapy. Mark looked uncomfortable. "Every week, all of us, including the children, when the therapist deems it appropriate. You'll pay for it." "Why should we?" Jessica began. "Because your children deserve parents who know how to have healthy relationships, and because it's my non-negotiable condition for having any relationship at all." Silence settled over the room. I could see them weighing their options, calculating what they'd lose versus what they'd have to invest. "The kids," Sarah said finally. "They were so confused. Emma cried every night." "And whose fault was that?" "Ours," Brian admitted. "We told them. We said you were having a breakdown." "Ah, yes. The confused elderly woman narrative. How did that work out when you tried to hire babysitters?" Sarah actually laughed bitter and short. "Everyone said their parents were having breakdowns too. Apparently we inspired a grandmother revolution. Patricia said 3 other families on the street had similar Christmas meltdowns. Good for them, I thought. We've hired a nanny, Brian added quietly, through an agency. She starts Monday. Good. The children deserve consistent professional care. She's expensive, Jessica muttered. Yes, quality childcare usually is. Maybe now you'll understand why what I provided had value. My phone buzzed. A text from Ruth, my new friend from the lodge. Coffee tomorrow, I want to hear how the homecoming went. I smiled, typing back quickly. Absolutely. I'll bring pastries. Who's that? Sarah asked, noticing my smile. A friend. I'm allowed those, you know. I'm cultivating quite a few new relationships with people who see me as Darla, not just as a service provider. That hurt them, I could see it. Good. Some truths needed to hurt to heal. So where do we go from here? Brian asked. That's up to you. I've set my boundaries. Therapy starts next week. I've already made the appointment. You can choose to show up and do the work or not. You can choose to respect my new rules or not. But choices have consequences, and I won't pretend otherwise anymore. And if we do, Sarah asked, if we do everything you're asking, then maybe we can build something real. Not the performance we had before where you pretended to love me and I pretended not to notice you didn't. Something honest. Mark stood suddenly. This is blackmail. No, I said calmly. Blackmail would be threatening to press charges for the theft unless you complied. which Margaret says I have every right to do. This is simply a woman saying she won't be mistreated anymore. If that feels like blackmail to you, perhaps examine why. He sat back down, properly chastised. The Valentine's plan, Sarah said suddenly. The kids want to do something special for you. They've been planning. They can still do it. I'd love that. But it doesn't erase what needs to be addressed. We know, Brian said. We don't know how we got here. How we became these people. Slowly, I said, remembering my own slide into enablement. It happened slowly, one assumption at a time, one taken for granted moment building on another until it seemed normal. But it was never normal. It was just normalized. My doorbell rang. Patricia stood on the porch with a casserole dish. Thought you might be too tired to cook, she said, eyeing the cars in the driveway meaningfully. You're an angel, I said, accepting the dish. Would you like to come in? Oh, I wouldn't want to intrude on family time. Please intrude away. We're just finishing up. Patricia entered, taking in the scene with sharp eyes. Well, don't you all look properly miserable? Sarah started. Save it, honey. I've heard enough excuses from my own kids to recognize them. Your mother's a saint for even talking to you. I hid my smile. Patricia had no filter, and right now that was exactly what this room needed. We should go, Brian said, standing. Mom, will you think about Sunday dinner like we used to do? I'll think about it. But if I agree, you bring the food. I'm done cooking for people who don't appreciate it. They filed out slowly, each pausing as if wanting to hug me, but unsure if they were allowed. I didn't make it easier for them. Affection like respect would need to be earned back. After they left, Patricia and I sat at my kitchen table, eating her casserole and drinking wine. You did it, she said simply. You really did it. I did. And honestly, it was easier than I thought it would be. The hardest part was believing I deserved better. Amen to that. So what's next? I thought about it. I'm going to take that pottery class, travel to see my cousin in Seattle, maybe even go on that Alaskan cruise. Look at you living your life. It's about damn time. That evening, I called each grandchild on their secret phone. They were bubbling with stories about their return to school, their new nanny, the chaos of the past week. Mom says we're going to family therapy, Emma mentioned. Is that because of Christmas? It's because we all love each other and want to learn better ways to show it, I said carefully. Will you be there too? Every week, sweetheart. Good. Maybe they'll learn to stop yelling. From the mouths of babes. As I prepared for bed in my quiet house, I reflected on the day. It hadn't been the tearful reconciliation of a Hallmark movie. It had been messy, uncomfortable, and incomplete. But it had been real. Change doesn't happen overnight. Trust rebuilds slowly. Respect returns in increments. But for the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt like we had a chance at something authentic. My phone buzzed one last time, a text from Sarah. I know we have miles to go, but I wanted to say I heard you today, really heard you, and I'm going to try to be the daughter you deserve, even if it takes me the rest of my life to figure out how. I typed back, that's all I ever wanted. The trying, the seeing, the hearing, we start from there. And we would, or we wouldn't. But either way, I'd be okay, because I'd finally learned the lesson I'd spent 68 years avoiding. You can't make people value you. You can only value yourself and accept nothing less from others. The Christmas rebellion was over. The New Year's revolution had begun. And Darla Thompson, grandmother, mother, teacher, and finally fully realized human being was ready for whatever came next. As for my dear listeners, I hope you see yourself in this story. Whether you're the grandmother taken for granted, the adult child who's lost perspective, or someone in between, remember this: love without respect is just use. Boundaries aren't walls. They're the framework that lets healthy relationships flourish. And it's never too late to teach people how to treat you, even if the students are your own children. So I ask you, what boundaries do you need to set? What respect do you need to demand? What life are you postponing while serving everyone else's needs? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more. Share it with someone who needs to hear that their time, energy, and love have value. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May your holidays be filled with genuine appreciation. May your relationships be built on mutual respect. And may you always remember that being a good grandmother, mother, or person doesn't mean disappearing into service. It means showing up as your full self and accepting nothing less than recognition of your full worth. Until next time, this is Darla Thompson reminding you that sometimes the greatest gift you can give your family is the truth wrapped in consequences tied with a bow of self-respect. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and may all your rebellions lead to revelations.